No doubt we live in an age where it's very easy to pick an EV SUV because by default the value for money choice is the Proton Emas 7. But what if you didn't want that, you still wanted a foreign make, but you do not want to be cliche and buy a BYD Atto 3? I guess the answer lies in this, the MGS5 EV. In today's video, we're going to find out what this C-SUV EV has to offer and whether you should really consider it or not. My name is Tariq Azbi and this is Caricarz.com. Okay, very quickly, if you've read our in-depth launch report of the MGS5, you will know that SAIC Motor Malaysia, MG Motor Malaysia, offers this particular C-SUV across 3 variants. The one I have specifically for today's review is the range-topping Lux Long Range, and in my opinion, this is the one to have, and it's definitely worth shelling out the extra ringgits for one. Let me show you why. But first, let's talk visual design, and yes, I will agree with some of you who argue, from a glance, the MGS5 EV does look a bit muted, a dime in a dozen, but I argue it has some very nice surprises when you look at it up close, like this very cool aerodynamic bit here in the front bumper. On each side, you'll find this slot. It's there for aerodynamic efficiency, very important for EVs. And look past the fact that it's a typical EV with no grille up front and look at the headlights. I think they're very nice. It's the typical double stack setup, but up top you'll find this very cool looking checkered flag motif LED DRL, whereas the main beam itself is all LED and is also adaptive. Moving down to the side profile, and the most clear thing you can see here is that the MGS5 EV has a rather respectably long 2730mm wheelbase, which is not bad, and that brings quite a number of benefits on board, which I will show you later. Otherwise, it's a typical SUV here where you find some SUV-like touches like this very nice looking silver finish roof rails. Moving down to the wheels, for this range-topping variant, you'll find that it rolls on some very tasty looking two-tone Aero design 18-inch alloy wheels. Otherwise, yeah, I agree, it's a bit muted down here, but it gets better at the back. Okay, moving down the rear profile, and as I promised, the rear fascia of this MGS5 is actually very interesting, more so if you look closely into some of the details. At a glance, it's very typical of another Chinese EV SUV because it has this typical full-width LED light bar that MG calls the arch taillight design. Yeah, I'm bored of this trend myself, but at least it doesn't look so bad in this MG and it gives it quite a bit of character here. But look closer and you will see that the rear tailgate over here in this section is actually slightly stretched and it gives a bit of a ducktail effect. So I think that's quite nice. It's really in the details. Otherwise, you get some very interesting touches like this rear spoiler and the typical SUV bit like this black cladding in the rear bumper. Otherwise, not a bad looking thing, a little bit muted, but again, I stress, perhaps some people can appreciate the stealthiness and the simplicity of this design. Okay, moving on, whilst we're still at the back of the MGS5 EV, let me show you one of its biggest wins of the cabin, and it's right here in the boots. Besides having a power tailgate that grants easier access, you will see that thanks to its rear-wheel drive setup, the packaging is also a lot better and is evident with this rather sizable 453-litre boot space. Let me also add that MG offers a force floor function for which as well. The only downside to having a rear-mounted e-motor in this EV SUV is that you won't find a spare tyre here. Instead, you get a tyre repair kit, but it's a small price to pay given the amount of practicality this rather sizable boot mentioned gives. Okay, with this range-topping variant in particular, what makes it even more worthwhile to acquire is its class-leading DC charging speed of 150 kilowatts. According to MG, that speed lets this car draw in 10 to 80% charges in just 26 minutes. That is very respectable. However, regardless of variants, I think there's only one thing here that might not sit well with many, and is that typical Chinese car 7 kilowatt AC charging speed. I guess I'm okay with that because of the very fast DC charging speed I mentioned earlier, but let me know your thoughts, folks. Are you okay with that? Hit the comments below. Okay, moving under the hood, and please forgive me, I'm doing all this symbolically for theatrical purposes because the actual e-motor for the MGS5 EV is mounted at the rear, making this a rather untypical rear-wheel drive SUV. You don't find that often in most other Chinese EV SUVs of the same size, and that perhaps explains why it has a rather interesting drive dynamics, which I'll talk about later on. But most importantly, outputs are respectably good. 168 horsepower and 250 Newton meters torque. 0 to 100 takes about 8 plus, nearly 9 seconds, but that's not too bad. It's rapid enough. Most importantly, in this variant, it gets paired with a rather sizable 62 kilowatt hour battery pack, and that gives you quite a bit of range, up to 430 kilometers in fact. Okay, let's move into the cabin, and I'd like to start in the front half of the MGS5's innards. And there's plenty to talk about here, but first, let's get all the typical traits out of the way, starting with the first thing right in front of me, this 10.25-inch digital instrument panel. I think more often than not, ICE or EV, if it comes from China, I will find this particular size. So I think 10.25 inch is pretty standard with most Chinese cars. But nonetheless, the display is all right. Nothing to complain about. It's also quite interactive. I only have one nitpick, which is very typical of any Chinese SUV, EV or ICE. They tend to forget to put a shroud here. So sometimes on a bright sunny day, it's a bit hard to read at a glance because of glare. Otherwise, it's all right. Nothing to complain about. And basically, if you take a quick overview of the MGS5's cabin up front, you will notice one quite untypical thing here. There's almost no gimmicks. I mean, some people have rotating screens, some people have cabin ambient lighting and whatnot, but this one, it makes do without all those theatrics, and I quite like it. It's simple, straightforward. It may not have the class-leading size for an infotainment touchscreen, but at least it still gives you wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. The display is very crisp, and I will also add the user interface for the screen is also very easy to master. But I think a lot of that also stems from the fact that MG still gives you physical controls and buttons and switches, critically for the climate control and the radio volume. Fantastic. I will also add that for this range-topping variant, it gets a number of added toys exclusively, like the 6-speaker count, which sounds pretty okay even though it's not a name brand audio system set. You even get a panoramic glass sunroof, which is quite sizable. My only complaint with this is that I think this fabric cover could be made a little bit thicker because quite a lot of heat still comes in. Apart from that, this variant, the range topper, also offers an exclusive wireless charging pad right here in the center console. I like the design of the center console because it's very neat, very classy. It even has this slot for a smartphone over here, and the neatness also stems from the fact that there is an electronic parking brake and this very nice and sleek rotary gear selector. Otherwise, it's nicely presented. It's practical because there's cup holders, this phone slot I showed you earlier, and this massive center armrest bin. You also note that it's very posh. Check out this suede lining on the center console. I like this. This is very untypical of most Chinese brands, and it feels very posh and neat because you'll find that there's a lot of very plush artificial leather lining the seats, which is in combination with soft fabric, and in the doors as well as the dash. Nothing feels cheap, nothing feels down market here. It's all very soft touch, very nice. There's even this lovely faux carbon fiber insert in the dash, and overall, I really don't have nothing else to complain. It really looks and feels very nice. And again, in the details, apart from that faux carbon insert, you'll even notice this MGS5 EV has a very squared steering wheel design, which is very untypical as well. So yeah, take what you will of the cabin design up front. I like it. And now we move into the rear part of the cabin in the MGS5, and as you can see, thanks to that long wheelbase I showed you earlier, it is a very spacious place to be in. Check out the amount of headroom I have, check out the amount of legroom I have, and most importantly, this being an EV, because it has a very tall floor sometimes, this one, the ergonomics for the seating at the back is actually pretty good. I'm very comfortable here. I can stretch my legs out. This is my driver's seat at my setting, but in a normal typical passenger setting, there's definitely a generous amount of space here. I like the feeling here because it's very posh, just like up front, because you still get the combination faux leather, artificial leather and fabric seat covers. And again, even in the back, MG did not skimp on making this car feel very upmarket. You'll find a lot of soft touch vinyls and plastics in the doors and everywhere else. There's an armrest with cup holders here, more importantly, adding to the comfort factor. There's dedicated rear aircon vents. By the way, this aircon is a dual zone automatic unit, so very nifty, and it's quite cold, thank God. And you even find a dedicated USB-C port at the back. Otherwise, overall space and comfort, this car is quite a big win on this front as well. And if I was looking at the EMA 7, this could make me sway away from it quite a bit if you ask me. So overall, in terms of packaging in the cabin and the execution, MG has done a really great job here. And I guess the real secret to its brilliance is delivering simplicity without any gimmicks. What do you think, folks? Do you agree? Hit the comments below with your thoughts. And the news gets better once you get into the MGS5 going and drive it, because this is where that rear-wheel drive, rear motor setup really shines again. I'm talking about drive dynamics. In my opinion, rear-wheel drive is the most natural setup for any car, and it feels the most balanced, the most predictable, and the easiest to handle. But that's just my opinion, folks. You can argue otherwise about front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive, but in the case of this EV SUV, it feels just right. And that applies to the powertrain as well, because it's not explosive, it's not the quickest, most powerful in segment, but it's just enough, just sufficient, and I mean that in a good way. Not, oh, it's just enough, just sufficient. It's really sufficient. And I love the fact how MG has modulated the delivery to simulate something like an ICE car, because it's very, very easy, very predictable. Even when you floor it, it's not instantaneous, but it's there when you need it. Overtaking on the highway is not an issue with this car because there's quite a bit of torque. Otherwise, it's very, very easy. I think this is one trait many people who are on the fence about adopting EVs will really appreciate. So as discussed earlier, both range and fast charging abilities are at a very acceptable level. So if you could manage your lifestyle a little bit, this is one car you could easily live with. Now, let me also highlight the other thing that MG has got right with the S5 EV, and that is the ride and handling. It's soft, supple, predictable. Not the sharpest tool in the shed, but it is sufficiently good too here. Overall, as you can see, I've got a couple of passengers making a cameo in this video, and I am hearing no complaints about the drive experience so far, because it is a very, very comfortable car to be in. Let me also add that a lot of that comfort doesn't just stem from the soft and supple ride. It stems from, well, this is an EV. Typically, it's ultra quiet. And this is where you also take note of the very, very high levels of NVH suppression this car has. Let me also add about sound. The other thing I love about this MG's lack of gimmickry is that it has no artificial engine sound. Oh, I love this silence, folks. So fantastic. Let me remind you that, the combination of both the soft and supple ride with this silent drive makes for a car that you wouldn't mind sitting in for long periods of times, more so when it's also this plush. Fantastic. The other thing worth highlighting here also is safety. Okay, MG, like most other Chinese rivals, did not skimp on this, so you will find a barrage of alphabets and acronyms. I'll just be simple and short about it and tell you that there is level 2 plus semi-autonomous driving abilities at minimum. So at some point, the car does feel like it could almost drive itself. It does feel a little bit too eager at times, and it could get a little annoying, but don't worry, you could switch them off easily. And yeah, overall, very little to complain with the way this car drives. If you ask me, could it go the distance? Maybe, if you do a little bit of lifestyle adjustment and planning, but definitely a near perfect urban runabout. And basically, that's everything I can tell you about the MGS5 EV in range topping, Lux long range form. And now you know why guys like me call this a criminally underrated EVC SUV. The only thing that begs you to think twice is its slightly stiff pricing, because if you remember, at launch, this particular variant was tagged at 135,900 ringgit. MG did do a promotional rebate that brings things down to 139,900 ringgit, but I've been reliably informed that there could be another revision coming, because, this is important news, the MGS5 EV will soon be locally assembled, or CKD, so stay tuned for updates on that. Otherwise, pricing aside, what should convince you in this car's favor versus its cliched rivals I keep referring to in this video is the after sales and warranty coverage provided, because regardless of price and variant, it includes firstly a 7-year 150,000 km base vehicle warranty, followed by a separate 8-year 180,000 km EV battery warranty, and another separate 8-year 160,000 km drive motor and motor control unit warranty. Now, I don't know about you, but that's enough peace of mind for me to want to shell out extra ringgits for this versus its cliched rivals. More so given the added perks of its lovely drive dynamics, its well-equipped status, and the fact that it has almost no gimmicks. It's a very simple upmarket car that does what it does, and I think that is untypically rare today. That's also why I love the MGS5 EV a lot more now. But that's just me, ladies and gentlemen. I want to know your thoughts. What do you think? Do you agree? Criminally underrated? Yes, no? Hit the comments below with your thoughts. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe.